Thank you so much for coming here. Today, we are joined by a longtime veteran of the independent wrestling scene, a member of Ring of Honor during the company's early years, who also appeared in Full Impact Pro, TNA Wrestling, has appeared on WWE television, and perhaps most notably, Billy Corgan's National Wrestling Alliance. Sal, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. Just reading off all that list was exhausting.
It's crazy because I'm 31 and I've been a fan of wrestling since as far back as I can remember. You first came on my radar with Ring of Honor,
Okay.
and it's crazy to me that I wasn't into it in 2002, 2003, 2004, but I got into it probably 2005, 2006, and it's crazy to me that it's been that long. And when I was doing
Yeah.
research on you, you have had such a tenured career.
Yeah, and it's crazy. It's one of those things where it seems like it started 20 minutes ago, and it also seems like it started 200 years ago.
Yeah.
It's just been. I'm a very fortunate dude, man, and I'm the same as you. I grew up a wrestling fan. Like that's what that's all I've ever wanted. That was it. I remember very vividly. In third grade, we were going around the room. The teacher was asking, what do you want to be when you grow up? And little Timmy wanted to be a dentist. And little Michelle wanted to be a doctor, and little Bobby wanted to be a dinosaur. I just wanted to be a pro wrestler. And I remember my teacher saying, I think little Bobby's got a better shot at being a dinosaur. So take that, Miss Bradshaw.
Definitely proved her wrong. Now, so when did you remember when you first started watching? Like, do you have a clear memory of your first match or first show or anything?
No, I kind of like the earliest memory I have is just a random superstars, and I couldn't even tell you. I mean, I know it was Bam Bam Bigelow. Is like kind of my earliest, like if I dig deep in the memory banks, but I also know I liked it before then. Just I just can't remember a time I wasn't enamored by pro wrestling. I always say uh Hulk Hogan was the dude that caught my interest first, just because he was a cartoon. I was a big cartoon, I mean the 80s were just such a different time. If you were if you had a cartoon series, you were beyond superstar status. You were everything. And to find out that this dude was real, like, oh my God. So, I would tune in to see Hogan, but I stayed because Savage. Uh, Randy Savage was just that guy that, like, you never knew what you were going to get, but you always knew it was going to be something awesome. He's the guy that, in the same promo can laugh and cry and yell and scream and speak real softly and make you listen. It just he always had different gear, which is big to me. He had the glasses, he had the robes. But yeah, I mean, just I can't remember a time in my life where pro wrestling wasn't in it.
No, absolutely. And you touched on a few great things there. For one, Macho Man Randy Savage, Hulk Hogan's great. I personally think like a lot of modern fans can't appreciate his impact, especially how big he
Never.
was. And
Yes.
even I mean, I wasn't born yet in the 80s, but I was in the 90s, right? So I saw the second run of his massive career because that's what people don't forget.
Yes.
There's been a few guys who have had one massive run. He's had two massive runs.
Two. Yeah, no, the whole NWO thing is just like I lived it, I remember very vividly. I didn't watch Bash at the Beach 96 live because I was actually helping out at an indie show.
Oh wow.
And yeah, and for whatever reason they were running a Sunday night, and so and thank God this is the era before cell phones and all that stuff and spoilers. So like it's not like anybody in the building was like, oh my God, it was Hogan. It was I had no clue. I had a buddy that had the illegal black box, and he knew I was going to this show to help out. He recorded Bash at the Beach for me. And so when I got home that night, he gave me the VHS tape that he recorded, and he was like, and he wouldn't tell me. Thank God he didn't tell me who the third member was. But he gives me this VHS, and I go home, and I'm just like, oh. And I mean, that whole Hollywood Hogan run was so different than the '80s run, but yet it was so big, like his '80s run. It's unreal. What all? I mean, Hogan's career just is insane.
No, absolutely, it's spectacular. And then with Savage, the thing that was great about him is, even like as a kid, there was an air of unpredictability where,
Yes,
obviously, when I wasn't even smart yet, I just knew like he could fly off the handle at any time, and you didn't know what to expect. Even if you kind of knew what to expect with everything else, with him, there was a magic there.
absolutely. And he was the guy that, like, he was the first guy when the Mega Powers exploded. Like I said, uh, Hogan drew me in, but Savage was the guy that kept me. And when the Mega Powers exploded, I was genuinely torn because, like, I know what Savage was doing was quote unquote bad, but like that was still my dude. So like, he was the first heel that I was like, you know what, it's okay. I'm still gonna cheer for him, and I'm what 89. I'm 7 years old, battling, good versus evil, and it just I couldn't not, I would find myself like at 5, I wanted Hogan to win. I was happy Hogan won, but then like in subsequent weeks, I was just like, I think I want Randy Savage to be champ again.
That's great, and I get it though, because that's how I was with the Undertaker. He was always my favorite, like from a young age. And it's funny
Yes,
because he was
yes.
terrifying, but when I was in that sweet spot of like 5 or 6, he was like in his prime babyface run at the time of like 96, 97. And
Yeah.
then the Ministry happened, and he's feuding with the Undertaker or with Stone Cold Steve Austin, and
Miss
everybody's going to
Austin,
be
yeah.
Austin's side. But I was sitting there cheering for the guy who wanted to embalm Austin with Paul Behrens.
Yes. Yes.
But no, that's crazy. And I had no idea you broke into the business that early. Like, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and I'm skipping ahead just a little bit, but
Yeah, you're fine.
um, I checked different resources because, again, I started following you in Ring of Honor, but before that, Wikipedia lists you as coming in at 2000, Cage Match at 1998, but Cage Match also lists your earliest match in 2001, so it's a mess. But
Yeah, no.
when did you first, I guess, when did you first decide? You said you wanted to be a wrestler in 3rd grade. When did you
Yes.
first take steps towards that? When did you find out about independence? When did that all?
Well, so I'm a big believer, a big proponent. I tell all the younger kids that I work with nowadays that do as I say, not as I did, because I did everything the wrong way. Learn from my horrible decisions. Like I said, I mean, wrestling was always just my thing, right? So like, I grew up in California, which was primarily a WWE territory. That was the big stars on the TV, and it wasn't until I found the aftermags that I was like, oh, there's a whole world besides WWE. And that's where I got introduced to the NWA and World Class and the stuff in Memphis and just like just all this other insane world out there that I could really only consume through these magazines. But I was always real big, and it's funny to me, going forward. But I was always real big on flipping to the back of the aftermags and reading the results by state. Not just to see what happened on WWF house shows, but to see what happened on a random Tuesday in Philly or whatever. I was just so enamored with pro wrestling that anything I could get my hands on, I would get. And that's how I started finding out about indies. So I was aware, my favorite story about all that is when I was in 93, 94, my little brother and I, we set up our own makeshift wrestling ring in our backyard, it was just mattresses. And then we dug 4 posts 4 wooden posts and put bungee cord, and that was our ropes. Like you couldn't just stand on them or anything, but it was just like it was as close to a ring as you could get, and like we knew to protect each other. Like we weren't doing backyard wrestling like it became, with light tubes and jumping off stuff. We were just emulating the guys we saw on TV, and we were always be those guys. Like I was never a character, like my own made up character. I was always like, I want to be Macho Man. I want to be Shawn Michaels. I want to be Razor Ramon or whomever. And I remember very vividly, he and I used to get in massive battles over who got to be Sabu. Keep in mind, I'd never seen Sabu wrestle. He had never seen Sabu wrestle. We just saw this crazy, scarred up guy upside down in the After magazine. So we were like, oh no, he's the best. Like, no clue anything about him other than what we read about. And that's kind of the gateway to the indies for us. Fast forward a little bit to 96, and I found out there was a promotion that was running a show at the Boys and Girls Club about 3 blocks from my house. And so, doors were usually at 6. I was there at 11 a.m. every day. Every time there was a show, I was there at 11 a.m. Like I will do anything to help. Like, and fortunately, they either were lazy and just wanted some punk kid to help, or they saw, like, oh, this kid really wants it. We'll throw him a bone. But like, they let me set up chairs. They let me help put up the ring. They let me sell the hot dogs. They let me sell the tickets. They let me whatever, and I was game for whatever because it's pro wrestling, right? So I could do whatever I want. And part of the deal was once the ring got put up and everything got organized, if there was time, they'd let me get the ring. Which was heaven to me. Like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Like I get to be in a pro wrestling ring.
How old did you say you were at this point? Sorry.
At this point, I was 13.
Oh wow. Okay, yeah. So you were quite young at this point.
Yeah, and like fortunately, just because, like I said, it's been something that I kind of got things. Like I didn't get, it's not like I walked in the door and got it, but like I understood how to do a collar and elbow tie up pretty much before anybody taught me, just because I'd seen 800 million of them in my life. So some of the guys would get me in the ring to bump me around just because they didn't want to bump each other. And they're like, hey, this idiot kid will fall down for us a million times and get up and do it again. Which 100%, yes, please. Bump me again. I'm game, right? So they I kind of grew on people, and they kind of, taught me different little things, but it was never like a training school where it was like, hey, this is the day I learned how to run the ropes, and this is the day this is the day we worked on chain wrestling, and this is whatever. It was just kind of like, hey, do you know how to take a hip toss? Well, I know what a hip toss is. Okay, tuck your chin. Here we go. Like, all right, now I'm taking hip tosses so the guys can transition to their next spot. And so that was like I said, my training was done in every fathomable incorrect way. Add to the fact I was also 13 years old, so that's
it's a little young.
Yeah. It's
no, out of curiosity, was your like family there with you, or was it just you and maybe your little brother? Like,
no, it was basically just me. So I don't really have much of a family life. My dad left when I was real young, and then my mom she kind of lived in her own little world. So like, because I've been out on my own since I was 14.
Oh wow.
Yeah, like like I said, it just was really not a good dynamic. So at 14, that's the summer of my 14th year, going on 15, because I'm a September baby. She said, you got to go. So I went. Like it wasn't even like a fight. You know, it was just one of those things where she was done. I was like, all right, man, cool, whatever, I'll figure it out. And so spent a lot of time on friends' couches, couple nights, you know, at the park or whatever. Uh, but you know, like I was always there when that show was running. 11 a.m. didn't matter. I'd find a way to be there.
That's kind of the
Uh,
beauty of wrestling, though, right? Like in a way, pro wrestling at times is kind of like the land of misfit toys, where
oh,
you have people from all different angles and all different corners who they
yes.
might
Yeah,
never meet, but there's something pulls them together. And
yes, no, and that's one of my favorite things. You just some of my closest friends in wrestling. In any other setting, I would never say a single word to these people. But we have that one common bond, and through that bond, like this friendship has grown where now they're irreplaceable parts of my life. Uh, and it's because pro wrestling. Like I'm a big, and especially now that I'm older too, I think it's just so cool. Like spending time in the locker room and just finding out other people's stories. Like, how'd you get here? You know, what's your background? It's crazy to me the different dynamics, the different lives everybody's led that has all led them to one spot. You know, I just think it's super cool that it's you know a lot of times I'll say, well, that's only pro wrestling. Only pro wrestling can this happen. And you know that's just my story. You know, like everybody's story is different, but I'll forever be grateful to pro wrestling because that's what got me. That's what got me through. You know, like I'm usually a pretty positive guy, anyways. But like, uh, even as a kid, like I've never drank alcohol in my life. I've never smoked a cigarette. I've never done a drug. Uh, because pro wrestling. You know, I was
mhm.
just like, oh, you know, obviously I was way wrong, but I was like, pro wrestlers don't do that. They're athletes.
Oh, yeah, you were in for a rude awakening on that one.
Yeah, I was. Imagine the shock, right? But you know, I just, but like those are kind of just been the morals that I've just lived my life by, and I tell everybody like they love to have me around because I'm a DD, right? Like, I don't expect anybody to live the insane uh, life I've lived. Like, if you want to drink, please go drink. Good news is I'm here, so I can make sure you get back to the hotel safe. Uh, or whatever your vice is, right? My vice just happens to be pro wrestling.
And that's a great vice to have. I mean, it comes with its drawbacks too, but the beauty of pro
Yeah,
wrestling is just, I mean, there's so many beautiful aspects of it, and that's kind of what this whole channel is going to be about. Is sharing people's stories, keeping people's legacies alive, but also just kind of reveling in it because there's a lot of negativity, especially in wrestling
yes,
media, and
yes,
it's hard to avoid. It's not just wrestling; it's life. You're going to find it everywhere. But like for a lot of us, pro wrestling has been our life one way or another,
yes,
just as you were talking about. And it like also another point you made, it's like a melting pot. People of all different cultures and races and orientations and upbringings, like everything. So many people from all walks of life gravitate towards it. It's not one demographic.
yeah. And it's funny because I've learned this through my life. Even the people that turn their nose up at wrestling always have the well, I remember one time story, right? So
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
oh, you do pro wrestling? That's ridiculous. Well, I remember when I was a kid, you know, blah 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 blah. It's just like, well, why is this ridiculous? If you've got stories, you know, like it's okay to just like stuff. You're not gonna get like I'm not gonna get mad at you for just liking stuff. It doesn't have to be your passion like it is mine. You can just say, oh, that's cool. You know, like
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be your everything. It's wild, but like everybody has some kind of pro wrestling story.
Mhm.
You know, it's kind of just woven into the fabric of the nation now, where you know, again, it's not everybody's as insane as me and has gone back and watched every episode of prime time that they could get their hands on, or studied Dusty's run in '85 to get to the Hard Times promo. I get that. That's cool. But like everybody's got that Dusty Rhodes story or that Randy Savage story or whomever it may be. And that's part of the magic of pro wrestling.
Yeah, that's the funny thing too is I've always encountered this thing where someone will find out about wrestling and at first they're kind of almost standoffish about it and then they'll be like, oh, but I can't believe this guy's the champion. Like when the Miz was champion, I got that a couple from two different people. They were like, oh, yes. I haven't watched that, but Miz is champion now. Huh? I can't believe what he did Monday. It's like you just said you haven't watched it since you were a kid.
Yeah. No, it's always that way, but it's okay. Like it's like I don't know why it's everybody's dirty little secret, but I'm just the one that's not ashamed of it, and happy to be associated with it in any like there's still that part of me that gets those butterflies in my stomach that like I can't believe if you would have told 13-year-old me like this is the career you're gonna have, I wouldn't have believed it. I wouldn't have believed it. I'm a lucky dude.
Yeah, and it's great that you can have that perspective because it's so easy to get lost in it when you're in it. It's hyper competitive. There's a lot of there's a lot of growth that people want. There's a lot of goals. There's a lot of pain. But for you to keep that perspective is great. Now, before we actually get to your first match, there was one other thing I wanted to ask. Okay, so you didn't have like the formal training, but eventually, did you start training with anybody on a regular basis, or how did that?
So like I didn't really like. I kind of just got thrown in the ring after and we could touch that in a minute. But like I've never had like training day with somebody to teach me, specifically with that goal in mind. Now, there's been plenty of times I've taken advantage of situations and just been like, talk to me, tell me everything you know, like, but I give credit, and I mean, and it's funny, I give credit to John Phoenix for training me. I was already 2 years. I'd already been working for 2 years before I even met John Phoenix.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I give him credit just because he's just my dude. Like I'm a loyal guy anyways. Like and John's just he's one of my best friends to this day. And I give him credit because he helped open doors for me that nobody else was willing to.
And that's huge. Now I also saw Jason Cross and Rick Michaels listed. Do you know why that is, or what story is that?
Well, so Jason Cross and John Phoenix for a long time were synonymous with each other. And it's funny just because, like, I mean, we're talking 20 years ago. I spoke to all three of those guys today.
Wow.
Like, yeah, it's like I said, I'm almost loyal to a fault, but like, if you're my dude, you're my dude. And but Cross is one of those guys that Phoenix would open doors, but I don't know if you remember Jason Cross from the TNA days, but he was the guy doing shooting star leg drops, which still to this day doesn't make sense to me. Like
crazy athletic.
Yeah, like athletic. It's not. I'll always say because we came up in the wild side, and we'll touch on that. But like Cross was a better athlete than AJ Styles ever was.
Wow.
AJ just wanted it more. AJ got it more in his brain than Cross did. But if we're talking just athletically gifted, Jason Cross was superior, and it wasn't even close. And then Rick was one of those guys that he ran the Wildside school. And once I finally broke in there, he really took me under his wing. Like Rick taught me a ton. Not so much holds or but the psychological side of things. Rick helped me out a lot, and Rick still helps me out a lot with stuff. I'll call him with crazy ideas. Plus, he does great gear. So he's one of those guys that when I have a crazy idea for gear, I'll touch base with him to see if it's even a possibility or if I'm if I'm fantasy booking how things are sewn.
Hey, there's a tip for aspiring wrestlers. You know, if you want to get gear, there's someone to seek out.
Yes, yes, and house show gear on Facebook. He's my current guy. Rick's busy doing famous people stuff. Rick does, like the Charlotte Flairs, and he does a bunch of those. He did Flair's robe or Rick Flair's robe for the last match.
Oh wow,
Yeah, he does all our Cardona and Brian Myers gear. I mean, his list is insane, and he gets pretty bogged down with those guys. But the guy that does my gear, house show gear on Facebook, his name's Adrian Hawkins. I actually trained him to wrestle. Uh, just incredible, incredible. And him and Rick talk, and especially when I come up with crazy, wacky ideas. So that's they're a good combo to have when I need them.
that's great. Okay, so the big question: when was your first match, and who was it?
Yeah, so my first match, the first match was in was May 1st of 1998. We were at a show and they were short guys and said, "Hey kid, want to be in a battle royal?" Hey, I've never wanted anything more in my life. Like, do I want to be in a battle royal? That's like asking if I want the Powerball number. Like, of course, yes, a million. They're like, well, we're kind of worried because at the time I was only 15. Said, do you mind going under a hood? I said, not a problem, dude. I'll go under 6 hoods. Like, what are you even talking about here? I'll literally do whatever.
Did you have gear?
No, I mean, I went to that show just like it was every other random show. So, like, they called me Snake Boy because I happened to have a snake mask that was given to me from the gimmick table. But I mean, it was snake mask, black shirt, warm up pants, and the shoes I wore to the show. I didn't have boots. Fortunately I had knee pads because I was planning on training that day. So at least I had that much. But I didn't even know to bring gear. But yeah, I mean, just the definition of indie outlaw pro wrestling kid. But I was in a battle royal, and it was the coolest moment of my life. I mean, and I was in and out probably 4 minutes. A couple of the guys let me do head scissors and a couple of high spots to them, and then they tossed me, and it was everything I could have ever wanted it to be.
Being in front of the fans for the first time, right? Like that's
yeah. I mean, I mean, like I pro wrestled. I did it. Like that was like, especially because we're talking 1998, where even with the cruiserweights on WCW, I'm 15 years old. I'm probably 5'5", maybe 105 pounds, and 60 of that's hair anyways. So I'd always heard, like, not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. You're not big enough to be a pro wrestler. You're never gonna be a pro wrestler. Just because, especially then, not that it still carries over to this day, but especially, in that era, it was, everybody was so preconditioned to 6'5", 320, jacked. And I was just never going to be that. And so it was, I'd heard the boo birds forever. You're not going to be a pro wrestler. It's not going to happen. 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 Bam, I did it.
One thing that's always crazy to me is you hear about Shawn Michaels and even
Yes.
Sean Waltman and Bret Hart being so small, and it's like, if you actually think about it, like, they're heavyweights by today's standard, practically, right? Like,
Oh yeah, it's wild because I remember the first time I met X-Pac, and I was just like, I've been lied to my whole life. This guy's big. Like, he's like a legit 6 something, like right at 6 foot. Like, what are these lines? It's amazing to me, and it's the power of the magic of TV where you don't appreciate some of these guys' sizes because it's just monsters amongst monsters. The biggest human you'll ever meet in your life is Billy Gunn.
Oh yeah,
He
he's
just doesn't.
huge.
Yes, he just doesn't ever stop being. He's just a giant mountain of a man. But when he's standing next to 6'6" Hunter and Road Dogg's like 6'3", and so it's just like one of these things where like I never appreciated how gigantic Billy Gunn was until I met him, and I was just like, oh my god. And X-Pac's the same way, Sean Waltman's the same way, where he's just like, man, you really got boned by TV, like. It's one of those things where as pro wrestling has evolved, it's amazing to me that a lot of those guys that I was told as a child were just tiny are actually large sized humans in any other world except for pro wrestling.
One of my biggest triggers, like for a long time, was Scott Hall referring to himself as the medium-sized Meng.
Yeah,
When he's like, what was he, like 6'6", something like that?
6'6". Yeah, get out of my face, medium man. I'm wearing a medium shirt right now. You would break all of this.
So with the size thing, and you said you had heard it at that point already. Was it ever a major deterrent to you, or was it something where you're like, it doesn't matter, I'll overcome it?
So I'll say it was delusional optimism as a child, and as an adult, I've kind of it was never a concern. Never once, because nobody could ever love pro wrestling as much as I loved pro wrestling, right? So like it doesn't matter. Didn't matter. I could be 2'4". It didn't matter to me. I was going to, like it. I heard the boo birds. I as I got older, I started to understand the logistics of it, but didn't care. I was like, okay, that's just my thing. I'm just gonna be small. Actually, like being small kind of is what propelled the whole trajectory of my life. Because like I said before, I was out on my own at 14. Then once I started to get to do a couple matches in May, I did the Battle Royal in May. Well, right around the same time, my grandmother and grandfather on my mother's side. My grandfather had Parkinson's disease, and my grandmother had fallen ill, and they lived in Macon, Georgia. And I had nothing to tie me to California other than that's where I was born. And I had kind of, through my aunt, who was the conduit, she had told me they really needed somebody to come help take care of them. And I said, well, hey, Macon's about an hour 15 south of Atlanta. WCW's got the cruiserweight division. At 15 years old, I decided, well, I'm just going to move cross country by myself to Macon, Georgia, so I can then go to the power plant and train with WCW and win the cruiserweight title. Foolproof plan.
Great plan, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I still to this day don't see a flaw in any of this logic.
Hey, those are some big plans. I love it. So you went to Georgia. How did you immediately have? Actually, before we even go there, were you wrestling regularly at this point when you moved over, or was after the Battle Royal? Did you not really wrestle immediately after?
No, I didn't. No. There was still. It was just one of those things that they were just short guys, but I was definitely becoming part of the family, and I think had I just stuck it out, I definitely would have been used regularly. But it was just one of those things where I had a gut feeling, make this move, go to Georgia, go beat Rey Mysterio for the cruiserweight title.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So yeah, no, there was no real regular bookings after that, and I still got to do the training bit and help put up the ring and all that stuff. And like I said, I got thrown a bone, and it was the thrill of my life up to that point. Uh, zero bad feelings about any of it. I was never promised anything. It's not like they said, "Hey, put on this hood, and we'll put the title on you, kid." It was, "Can you do it?" I did it. It was great. Uh, but then I had that experience in my back pocket. So when I moved cross country, at least I had something like, "Oh yeah, I've trained."
Yeah, and that's kind of the benefit where you don't have to necessarily give all the details. You can just be like, yeah, I trained. I got in the ring a little bit. I did a
Yep.
show.
Yeah, no. The thing is, those that one show, because yeah, I've done a couple shows, and you can name drop people that, again, this is '98, so internet's limited. It's not like you could just look up a name on your phone immediately. So when I say, oh, I was, when I say, oh yeah, Bill Anderson trained me, or I trained with blah blah blah. It's not like you can look it up immediately and be like, no, he didn't. Got
that,
me.
that's something that's wild to me too. Is like in the past, promoters would hire people just from an 8x10. Like I remember in Chris Jericho's book, his first one, like he was talking
Yeah.
about sending a 8x10 to Germany, and it got him booked. And he got there, and the promoter was disappointed because he looked smaller than his 8x10. But the
Yes.
idea that like that's all you sent to someone and it would get you, it's mind blowing in today's media focused
Oh,
world.
100%. Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. It's just, and getting to experience all of it too. Just like, because I remember the 8x10 days. You got to have your matches on VHSs, so you'd go buy the 5-pack of blank tapes so you can record off your match to send it off here and send it off there, just to where it is now, where two clicks and a link is in everybody's hand that needs it. It's wild.
So was NWA Wildside the first company you got in touch with when you were there, or
No. So once I got here and got settled, uh, I kind of just got my feelers out to everywhere I could in Georgia. And again, I kind of just followed my pattern of just show up when shows were happening and kind of get to know people. There was a place, there's a family fun center called US Play, that would run Wednesday night shows, and I'd be up there all the time, and that's where I met a lot of guys that I ended up just becoming some of my best friends in pro wrestling. But at the time, I'm 15, 16, just trying to get my foot in the door anywhere I can. But I had always heard, like, from Jump Street, it was, if you're gonna you want to get a part, you want to be an NWA Wildside, you want to be an NWA Wildside, that's the place to be. So that was kind of the back pocket goal. Like, I want to get there, but at the time, I wasn't ready for, even if that spot would have opened up, I wouldn't have been ready for it. But there was a show at a local fair right down the road from me, and that was the first time I saw Jason Cross, and I was just like, oh my god, this guy, like, he was doing stuff that, like, I didn't even know a human body could do. Just blew me away. So I hung out after the show and finally got to meet him. It was just like, dude, I'm, wow. And I kind of told him, like, yeah, I've trained a little bit, but I'm trying to get my foot in the door in places, if you know anywhere. And he gave me his email address. So I got home and I emailed him immediately. Hey, Sal, I met you at the fair tonight. Big fan. Would love to tag along with you to some shows. And after about 2 months of pestering him, he finally gave in. Said, "Okay, come with me. I've got a show where I need a manager. Do you mind managing me?" I said, "I'll be whatever." And so he was doing like a pretty boy gimmick, and I was going to be his French photographer, Pierre Escargot. And we did it one time, and that night he wrestled Jimmy Rave, who went on to become my best friend. Uh, and he was just kind of like, oh wow, like there's actually something there. You're not just talk. I was like, oh no, I can, dude, I love this stuff. And he was like, okay, you're going to be in the car with me from now on. Keep in mind, Jason Cross doesn't talk that clearly now. Ever since there was a night at a place we used to wrestle called Good Old Days, he tried to do a double moonsault. And remember, this is back into '99, where pulling out a double moonsault wasn't something that just like, it was just unheard of. And for whatever reason, he opened wide on the first one and then tried to tuck on the second one and landed straight on his head. And ever since that day, he's kind of lost the ability to enunciate. So he's very Boomhauer. Hey man, you're gonna have to text me. I don't. Those aren't words, buddy. I love you. Those aren't human words. Uh, but yeah, Jason threw me in the car, and I became his favorite opponent because I could take all his crazy high spots. He's doing front flip unprettiers, and like I could post for a brain buster, and he could hold me up, and he looked huge compared to me. And I had no fear laying there eating that shooting star leg drop or just whatever. And fortunately, one of my strengths has always been having the ability to put a match together. So, he would lay out the 9, 10 things he wanted to do, and I would lay out when and why. And that was kind of just how our chemistry worked. And it was through him that at the end of '99, December, like right at New Year's, is his best friend was John Phoenix. And they were booked against each other. And that's where I met John. Actually, I met John's now wife of, a million years. I met her first because I was hitting on her. And she reminds me of that every time I talk to her.
Never lets it go.
Which is frequent. Yeah, which is but I met John, and John and I mean, instant chemistry. I mean, we just clicked immediately. Just similar personalities, similar, we laughed at a lot of the same things, which is probably not appropriate. But we just got along immediately. And he, at the time, was at Wildside. And so he always told me, like, bear with me. We're going to get you in Wildside. I think you could blossom there. Okay. And sure enough, he got me on in summer of 2000. They were running like a house show because Wildside would run TV's first and third Saturday of every month in Cornelia. And then the off weeks, they would try to fill it in. And they were running one of their house shows in Athens. And he said, hey, got a spot for you. And he got me on, and I worked a bunch of. So at the time, Rick was running the school at Wildside, and he had a bunch of young guys around my age. We're talking 15, 16, 17 that were breaking in too. So they threw me in the ring with them, and it worked. And they said, well, we also run the Friday night shows where like it was little to no pay, but it put your name on the board. Kind of got you at least noticed enough to where if they needed guys for the TV, they know they could use you. They know you're reliable. They know what you can do. And then I think I started regularly at the Friday night shows in November of 2000. And I never looked back.
That's interesting because that is something that a lot of times people have to do, and there are some who take advantage of it too. But sometimes you just need to get seen and show that you're
Yes.
committed. And there are those who will take advantage of that, especially there's some promoters in the past who have been very, you know, oh, I'll get you next time, kid. But you know,
Absolutely.
but in general, sometimes you gotta spend money to make money, so to speak, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not one of those things where I was never lied to. I was never once told like, hey, start here and we'll get you, $80 a night or whatever. Yeah, they were always upfront with the money and everything. Like, hey, you're not getting paid in dollars. This the trade-off is you're getting exposure, and because Bill Behrens was running Wildside, and the whole thing was like, I'm not going to pay you here in Cornelia, but when outside bookings come, I can get you on those and get you paid.
Mm-hmm.
And it was understood. So I can't tell you how many $20 nights I got from Wildside, but they never came as a shock. Like there were definitely nights I wish I would have got a couple more dollars, but I knew what I was getting into. But like at the same time, I was when I was there, when I started there, it was a WCW developmental ground. So like I'll never forget it. I don't know if you know the building in Cornelia, but it's the most rinky dinky, run down. You would never suspect this place to ever hold a human being, much less pro wrestling every other week. There's so many names that have come through the doors of that building. And you couldn't find it on a map if it was circled and highlighted. It's just, but it's also like they nicknamed it years later the Church of Southern Wrestling, which is about as apropos as it gets. But like, so the first time I get to the building in Cornelia, you've got to walk up these rickety steps that were probably built by Farmer Ted in 18 Oct 5. Like he just this is a safety violation in every way. I walk up these stairs to the back, and the first person I run into is Bob Sapp,
Oh wow.
who's sitting down in a chair and still looking down to see me because he's just a gigantic man. I was just like, oh, this is a different world. But like, it was a WCW developmental, so that was like, that's part of my master plan coming into play, right? Like, I'll get on at Wildside, I'll get noticed by WCW, blah blah blah. I beat Rey Mysterio for the cruiserweight title. It's foolproof plan.
It sounds like beating Rey Mysterio for a title might still be your plan to this day.
It's 100%. Like, that's the one, like, that king of the bucket list right there. I got to beat Rey for something.
When was your first time meeting Bill Behrens? Because I know you mentioned that he got you in, or, well, obviously he would hire you. And what were your impressions of him early on? Because I know he's a figure who doesn't get as much appreciation. He's not really talked about as much, but for those who knew him, they talked about him all the time.
Yes. So Bill, John, like I said, John Phoenix and I, we developed this friendship. So John had known Bill way before me. So John had already put the seed in my head of what Bill was. So when I met Bill, my first impression had already been planted here months before. But Bill was always he's got such a unique take on everything. And again, Bill's one of those guys that I just saw Bill Saturday. He's like I said, I'm loyal to a fault. Like if you took care of me, if you were good to me, I try to always remember that and take care of you and repay it in any way. I'll see Bill in 2 days, at the NWA shows. He's still running Gorilla. I call it Behrens magic. Behrens always finds a way to appear. Like, I don't know how he does it, but Bill always finds a way to somehow still be involved in pro wrestling. And the number of guys that he's influenced or helped out is astounding. AJ will always be at the top of the list. Just if AJ was his prize pupil, he was the fair haired stepchild. He was the one. But I mean, like I said, when I broke into Wildside, he had AJ, he had Paris, Air Paris. At the time, we had a guy named Prince Justice who grew up to be Abyss. He was there, but I mean, just there's again.
Was Caprice Coleman there yet?
Yes, Caprice was there, and it's funny. Just I often forget where Caprice is now in the business. Like in my brain, Caprice is just sometimes that Wildside guy, because there was a long lull where Caprice had vanished. And then he popped up in ROH and started taking over the world, which should have happened years prior. But
and somehow he looks better than ever.
He doesn't age. I yell at him all the time for it. Like, come on, man! Like, save a little of it for me. Like,
now, R-Truth, he was down there, but was he already signed when you started? Like, how did that?
Nope. He was on his way out the door. Like, he was getting ready to get the WWE deal and go be K Crush.
Okay.
But I mean, he's another one of those guys, But like we had, especially with that WCW crossover, Shane Helms and Shannon Moore. That's where I first met Jamie Noble, who I grew up, who's still like every time I run into Jamie, it's a family reunion. I love Jamie to death. He's a part of one of my all-time favorite wrestling stories, and we'll touch on that later. But just like, that WCW crossover was all because of Bill. Bill's the one who knew Terry Taylor. Terry Taylor wanted something local to Georgia so they could send the power plant guys to. And again, I'm reaping the rewards because of what Bill does. And I mean, Bill's still, like I said, to this day, he's awesome. I mean, he's super duper agent to the stars. He's gotten me booked on a lot of stuff throughout my 20-year run now. Bill's a dad to so many of us young guys, especially the crew that I came in with. Most of us had at least one parent not involved, and Bill kind of became that father figure for a lot of us. So, Bill's awesome. He's just awesome.
Sounds like a good dude, and gave you a lot of opportunity. And you mentioned a lot of the talent who were there. I did want to ask this earlier, and I forgot. Who was the first real wrestling star you encountered in person, at a show, and who was the first one you had a match with?
It was the first one. I mean, even at the time, he wasn't a star, So I would say the first person that I was just like, oh, he's TV famous, was probably David Flair, and it was that first night I was at Wildside. David Flair was there, and this is during his run with Crowbar, and it was cooler than the other side of the pillow on ice. David Flair was awesome. My first name guy, I would say their names to me, just because I knew, like I said, I was such a hardcore pro wrestling fan that you'd have to be pretty slick to slide a guy by me. One of the very first things I did for Wildside Television, it was a tag team gauntlet, and we worked with the Cole Twins, who I recognized from WCW in '93. And we're talking, this is 2000 now. They hadn't been on TV for a long time, but I'm losing my mind because it's the Cole Twins. Does nobody understand how cool this is? The answer was no. Literally nobody cared.
No, I get that. I mean, I was that way with the Heartbreakers, the Heartthrobs. When I
Yes,
like
yes.
it's funny though because when you are as in the bubble as you are and myself is, and hardcore diehard fans and those in the business who are diehard, you know sometimes it's hard to even adequately explain like how over the top it is to people who don't
Absolutely.
understand.
Absolutely. It's very much, you know, one of those things where either you get it or you don't get it. And no matter what I can do, if you don't get it, no matter what I say to you, you'll just never get it. But if you do get it, I don't have to say anything.
Yeah.
And it connects, but yeah, that was the first time I was just like, this is super cool. I'm wrestling TV, guys.
So it wasn't too long after this because what point are we at now? We're probably
We're
breaking into
about
2001.
2000, 2001, yeah.
Okay, so this is when WCW and ECW are on the decline.
Yes.
From someone in the business at the time, even though you were still, young and starry eyed and
Super young,
optimistic,
yes.
did you see and did you know that they were going down while they were? And if
No.
not, or even if so, what was your reaction when everything was going on? Like, how did that affect the business around you? How did it affect you?
So instantly, I didn't get it. Like, keep in mind, at Wildside, the night before Super Brawl, what was that? 10? It had to have been 10.
I
Super
think
Brawl
so.
1 was 91. So whatever the last Super Brawl was, 2001, it was Jindrak and Palumbo versus O'Hare and Stasiak uh, on the pay-per-view. The night before, they're doing that match in Cornelia to work out the kinks, right? So this is February of '01. So I couldn't have, even then, like nobody thought like, oh, WCW is going out of business. AJ and Paris had just signed.
Yeah.
So like not any of us ever thought like we heard the rumors that oh, WCW might be up for sale, but like okay, sure, heard that before, never gonna happen. You know, everything's fine. At the same time, not too long before that tag match, Kid Cash and Jerry Lynn had come in to do a Wildside shot, and they were both asking around, other guys, and I just noticed, I just overheard it, where they were asking other guys about work because they didn't think ECW was going to last long, and I was like, that can't be real, like no way, I was just, we're talking about two stalwarts of my life, like
Yeah.
0% chance. And so when the news breaks that WCW's gone and Vince had bought it and that ECW was gone, it was just, I was more shaken as a fan than I was a wrestler because I didn't even grasp, like, oh, there's so many jobs that aren't available anymore.
Yeah.
Like that didn't hit me till later. It was genuinely, as a pro wrestling fan, I was like, what the crap? Whoa, no. Like, what am I going to do on Thursday now? I can't watch Thunder. What am I, like,
Were you an
none of this is
ECW guy, by the way?
a huge ECW
I had
guy.
a feeling.
Yeah, like I said, me and my brother fought over who got to be Sabu before we ever saw Sabu. Uh, it wasn't until I started doing the shows in California where I found out about tape trading.
Oh boy, yeah.
Yeah, and then then I got to start getting my hands on this stuff, especially since those shows I was on. So Louis Spicoli was in and out of there.
Oh, okay.
So honestly, if you want to, the first name I ever met was Rad Rad. It was Louis Spicoli. Uh,
So underrated.
yeah, he was the best. He was super. It was just like, oh my god. But like, so like, here's a guy I would see on a Saturday in California, and then I'd get a tape, and he's giving Tommy Dreamer a Death Valley driver, which I'd never seen before, right? It was Spicoli driver, right? So it's just like, this guy's completely changing the game, and he used to be a body Dono. Like, he's the best of all time. Just because the new generation's my era. Like, I love the new generation. I've got a story about that coming up. Yeah, little spoiler alert for those tuning into the Hard Times pay-per-view this weekend. But yeah, so like it didn't even make sense to me that ECW was gone, that WCW was gone. That means these jobs were gone. It meant I don't get to watch these shows anymore. Oh no. And then it was so they both went down in March of 01. It was the summer of 01 where it kind of sunk in on me like, oh no. Like, there's nowhere to work.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
Like, Rey Mysterio doesn't have a job. How can I beat him for the Cruiserweight title? Like,
It's definitely it's crazy how much the industry changes, because a decade prior, or maybe a little more than a decade prior, something similar happened. Not to the same extent, but the territory is starting to dry up, and you had all these places that were starting to shut down, and it was all, and then everything got really healthy. The industry was set on fire like practically never before. At least in a different way.
Yes.
And now suddenly everything was shifting again.
Yeah, and it's crazy. Just the beauty of hindsight is when you were living it, when you were in that moment, when you were in the 96 and the 97 and WCW is on fire and people are genuinely like, oh, I think Vince is going to go out of business. It seemed like it was forever. But in the grand scheme of things, WCW was hot for 3 years. It's just 3 years. Like, that's not WCW. Turner bought it in what, 89?
Yeah.
It made it till 01. We're talking a little over a decade. That's crazy to think about.
ECW was only around
93
years, 9 years.
Yeah. Crazy to think about how quick that is in hindsight. Because living in the moment, like, I remember ordering Barely Legal and thinking ECW was about to take over the world.
Mm-hmm.
4 years later, they weren't in business.
Yeah. Austin's run.
Crazy.
Austin's run on top was,
oh, exactly.
3 years.
Yes.
And it was one of the greatest runs of all time, but it was only 3 years.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild when you start putting numbers on stuff sometimes where it's just like, this doesn't seem right. But it's it's as right as it gets.
We were leaving off on everything, everything shut down. The business was changing. And as scary as that is, there's soon going to be changes in a different way. Because in the next year, Ring of Honor pops up, TNA pops up. What was on your radar first personally?
TNA was on my radar first only because the shocker Behrens was involved, right? So Thanksgiving of 2001, right? Yeah, Thanksgiving of 2001, I got booked to work for Burt Prentice in Nashville. And, Bill had helped set that up. And at the time, I was teaming in Wildside. I was teaming with a young man by the name of Seth DeLay. And, our combined age wasn't legal drinking age. We were babies. So when I got to Wildside, Rick had asked me, like, hey, what's your name? And I was like, I had thrown a couple ideas out there. And I said, one of the names I threw out there was Kid Ecstasy. And he goes, oh, that's perfect. I got a kid named Kid Cool. Do you mind teaming with him? We'll come up with a team name for you guys later. So that's fine. So we tried it out on a Friday night show. We just clicked. I mean, and Seth at the time was probably I mean, I would be shocked if he was 15, if he was 16. There's probably I know he was 15 because he wasn't able to drive yet. So he was Kid Cool. I was Kid Ecstasy. We were G rated, but the G stood for good looking. Uh, and we often worked with like Rick's two prized pupils who were the Lost Boys, who, yeah, again, I mean, same age range as us. I mean, I don't think any of us were 18 years old yet. And here we are, Thanksgiving night, booked to work the Nashville Fairgrounds for Burt. And I don't know if they knew, because like outside of there was one guy on the Lost Boys that was a wrestling fan growing up, and the other two just kind of fell into it. But like Chad, who's the one I was closest to, I don't even think he grasped like what working the Nashville Fairgrounds on Thanksgiving meant, right? And so like I'm losing my mind, and when we get there, we meet Burt, and Burt becomes a big fan of our match, and asked us for more dates, and had mentioned, well, I know Jeff Jarrett, and Jeff Jarrett's talking about starting a new company, and I think he needs young talent like you guys. So this is on my radar, November of 01. So I'm like, oh my God, Jeff Jarrett. Like, I love Double J. Like, please let this happen.
So at this point, you weren't, because there's always that thing where, oh, there's this new millionaire-backed promotion coming up, and they're almost never true. There's exceptions. But at this point, you weren't jaded enough to doubt it. You were like, okay, Jeff Jarrett, I know him. I know.
Yes. No, keep in mind, I was also so young that they could have used the fake millionaire name, and I've been like, this is the real deal. This is happening. But especially using the Jarrett name in Nashville, like, plus I knew, I'd known of Burt because I'd read about Memphis Championship Wrestling and Music City Wrestling. And I knew Christopher Love from Global. Like, I was familiar with who he was. So I trusted the word. And then once the year turned into 01, and then the whispers kind of picked up, and the whispers became talk, and talk became yelling, and then like, oh my God, this is really going to be a thing. And like, there was a show at the fairgrounds in March of 01 that a bunch of us got booked on, and AJ was working David Young that night.
Oh, would it be 02?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I apologize. Yes, it was 02. It was 02, but that's the night that Jerry Jarrett first saw AJ Styles. AJ worked David Young, and immediately you guys are signed. Immediately. Wow. Yeah, I mean, you guys, I mean, instant. And I had known them because they were Wildside guys. So I knew, like, I was like, oh my God, this is a possibility. And then we went and did our match. And like, it was a pretty good match. And, we were happy with it. Well, my buddy Chad, we get brought to when we're done, we get to the back, and we're kind of high fives and, thank you. We had a good time. And suddenly Chad's missing. And I was like, oh, wow, did Chad get a job? And 20 minutes passes, and Chad comes back, and he's completely, I mean, just all the color sunken out of his face. And I'm like, hey, what's going on, man? And he goes, well, they asked me about coming to do something with Jeff Jarrett. I was like, dude, that's so cool, man. Like, obviously part of me was like, I hate you. I want to fight. I want to fight you for real. But like, I was genuinely happy for him, right? Like, hey, dude, that's awesome. And he goes, yeah, there's a problem. I go, what's the problem? He goes, they asked me if I'd get breast implants.
Oh God.
He goes, yeah, I went into Jerry Jarrett's office, and he laid out this whole idea where like, I'm going to be a dude, but I'm going to get breast implants because the only way I can get noticed is if I was a female and not a male. And I was like, I don't understand because you're not pretty.
That's the leap in logic right there.
Yeah, like I was one of the whole boob thing. Yeah, I'm with you there, but you're not pretty. Like we could put lipstick on this pig, but it's still gonna be a pig, buddy. But he was like, I don't know what to do, and I was just like, oh wow. So like in my brain, that's the thing where I was like, this is 100% a real deal. If they're pitching ideas like that, like this thing's full boogie, I got to be a part of this. And so I kind of stayed on Bill pretty regularly. Like, hey, what's up with this Jarrett thing? What's up with this Jarrett thing? What's up with this Jarrett thing? I'd stayed on Bert, what's up with this Jarrett thing? And then I got the call. Hey, you're booked in Alabama. It's going to be the first pay-per-view, and they're taping the second one. And so I'm like, oh my God, this is really happening. So it's never on any of my Wikipedia pages or anything because I didn't do anything that night, but I was booked as extra talent. Keep in mind, nobody ever told me I was extra talent. They just said I was booked.
Yeah.
Which was heartbreaking when I got there and I realized, oh no, like I'm not doing anything. That's the worst. Like
at the time, it had to be a blow.
Oh, it was 100%. Just because, like I said, I had never. They didn't tell me I had something, but they didn't tell me I didn't have anything. So I kind of thought I was being brought in as talent. But like, dude, there were so many guys there that it was just like, oh, this is cool. Like, I definitely want to be a part of this, especially since the sales pitch I got from the TNA end was always, well, look, wrestling fans are paying $90 a month for pay-per-views between WCW, ECW, and WWE. That marketplace is dead. It's just the WWE. So we're asking for $10 a month. You're still essentially saving $20 a month. And in my brain, I'm like, all those numbers add up.
Yeah.
What I didn't take into account was nobody was buying the WCW pay-per-views and the ECW pay-per-views. That's why they went out of business.
That's a good point. And there was no television to promote the shows,
Yes.
So who was your first contact into, like, besides, like, talking to Bird as a kind of, like, did you talk to Jeff? Did you talk to Jerry? Did you talk to...
No, I didn't speak to either one of them till the day of the show. And it was just, hi, I'm Sal. Thanks for having me. Oh, we'll let you know if we got anything for you. Okay, yeah, thank you. It was Bill was always my point of contact.
All right.
And it was just crazy because it was just like I knew AJ personally. I'd been in cars with AJ. I cracked jokes with AJ. I'd heard AJ fart, and now here's AJ hanging out with Scott Hall. And it's just like, oh, this is a weird dichotomy. Like, this is not normal. Like, Jeff Jarrett, who, like, even as a kid, I was for real a Jeff Jarrett fan. So it's not like oh, I hated this guy, but now I want him to like me. Like, no, as a kid, I was like, I loved the Double J gimmick. I loved the country guy. So, like, to be in the same building with him and, like, seeing one of my friends, like, have regular conversations with him blew me away. Like, I just total, it was starstruck. It was hunger because, like, I wanted that. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be a part of this thing. It was super, super cool, and I got brought back. I did a bunch of different spots for TNA. Those early years, man. If you go back and review the pay-per-views, I can't tell you how many fights I stopped from happening. Very poorly, by the way. I'm a horrible security guard.
Yeah, it seems like the security never really do their job pretty well these days.
Yeah, I'm really. I actually at one point I had it was after one of my WWE security spots where I failed miserably. And I think I got the McMahon's beat up or something. And I said, man, I want to put together like a vignette of just a series of vignettes of me trying to get back into the game. Like I've hit rock bottom as a security guard and I've let everybody that's ever hired me down. And now I'm the over exuberant security guard that's securing stuff that doesn't need to be secured.
Oh, that's great.
Until I finally get the confidence and I get the call, one more shot, one more chance to be a security guard for somebody that matters. And then, of course, it would just tie it into a WWE or TNA extra spot that goes awry again. I'm just like, that's it, I quit.
Oh, that's fantastic. So I don't know of every match you had in TNA, but I know it said in 2002 you had one with Conan. Was that?
Yeah.
Because Conan, obviously, like, first of all, he was huge in WCW, but he was even bigger in Mexico. How was that like? Was it your first time meeting him? Or
no, just I actually I don't remember the line. I think I did a couple because I know I did a couple matches with 3 Live Crew. I don't remember if one came before the singles with Conan.
My note says Conan was 2002 and 3 Live Crew was 2003. But I could, but that doesn't mean it has everything. It doesn't have dark matches. It doesn't have everything.
Yeah, no, because I definitely worked 3 Live Crew like 3 times.
Yeah.
So if it's only showing 1, then I know that's incorrect. But I mean, it was definitely my first singles match with Conan, and I couldn't have been more excited. Like again, huge. I'm a wrestling nerd. I'm a self-professed huge wrestling nerd. So like, I had known Conan for a long time. Like he had been in my life for a long time at that point. So just like, oh yeah, you're just gonna do a singles match with Conan. I'm just like, oh, this is freaking insanely awesome. And it was super cool. And I made sure when he did the Rolling Thunder, or what was it, the clothesline.
Yeah.
When he did the rolling clothesline, I made sure to take a flip bump off of it instead of just a regular one. And when we got to the back, he was like, "Oh man, thank you so much for that. Like, that's really cool that you did that for me." And I'm like, "Dude, you just hit me with your rolling clothesline."
Yeah.
I don't think you understand how cool that is.
Internally, you're just ready to explode in joy.
Yes. Like it's one of those surreal moments where you just like, and fortunately, it's because of stuff like that early on, where like I got to work with the Conans and I got to work with Road Dogg and I got to work with Crush, and it's there. It's early on in my run that I learned to take the step back and appreciate the moment while I was in it instead of waiting to appreciate it later, because it might not ever happen again, So like, I very distinctly remember taking that flip bump from Conan, hearing the crowd's reaction and thinking, yeah, that was cool. Like this is a very, very cool moment.
Those bumps are great. And especially when Rikishi, of all people, would take that clothesline.
Stupid. Dude, insane.
Massive, and he did it beautifully. Yes.
Yes.
So you mentioned Truth and Road Dogg also. Now with Kid Crush, Truth, Ron Killings, you met him before he got signed, and this was when he came back. Did you talk to him a lot before he got signed, or was it more of just like, hey, how are you, kind of?
No. I mean, he was literally out the door as I was coming in. So, I mean, we had definitely said our hellos and, shared pleasantries, but like, I was just another face in the crowd. Yeah. But, like, there was also that connection just because he'd seen me interact with AJ. Mm-hmm. And so he he knew that there was some kind of connection there. So like Truth was to this day. I just saw him a couple weeks ago at Raw. I mean, he's always been over the top, very, 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 very cool with me. Which is it's weird, it's wild, but it's just like, dude, you're you. Like
Yeah.
you're forever over. Like
Speaking of a guy who doesn't look his age at all.
No, he just quit aging. He turned in his notice, so not going to do it, and agent accepted it. Said, all right, that's cool. You don't have to. You're omit from aging ever.
We'll probably cover a lot of stuff if I'm fortunate enough to have a part two. But I do want to talk about your recent Raw appearance before tonight's over, because that one very interesting. But I want to know what it was like working with Road Dogg, because I know this wasn't his best time period. He had his struggles, but I don't know if it was apparent.
No, well, it was a given. Like we all kind of knew, but at the same time, it wasn't bell to bell. It wasn't. His issues weren't anger or anything like that. So like when it came to the match, like I said, I worked with them quite a few times, to the point where the last time I did a 3 Live Crew match, Truth and Road Dogg said, hey, who are your partners? And I was like, whomever they were. I was like, that kid. They go, all right, you figure out who's taking what and just let us know. Just because those explosion matches with 3 Live Crew were pretty rinse, wash, repeat, right? It was just what guys taking the punches, what guys taking Conan's shoe, and what guys doing the up and over spot with Truth.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, what did I want to take, and then who wants to fill in the blanks for the other ones?
That's not a bad spot to be in, though. To be kind of almost the lead on that end.
Absolutely. The thing is, yes, they trusted me, and like just the explosion matches, because like I did quite a few that for whatever reason didn't make air. I remember 3 weeks in a row. 1 week I worked Jimmy Rave. The next week I worked Jason Cross, which was like one of those like, man, this is cool.
Yeah.
Like, this is just me and the dude that I used to travel the roads with, and here we are at TNA. And then the next week it was a 6-man, where it was, and I cannot remember the teams to save my life, like who was on what team, but I know it was me and Matt Sydal and Delirious and Jimmy Rave and like Matt Sydal, one of Matt Sydal's trainees, and Shark Boy. And after this is really was part of the wool of pro wrestling started getting pulled over, unveiled from my eyes, where I did the Jimmy Rave match, and we got to the back, and Jerry Jarrett was sitting in Gorilla, and he goes, boys, that may have been the best explosion match I've ever seen. And Jimmy and I were both like, oh my God, we're about to get signed. And then the next week, I did the Jason Cross match, and I get to the back, and Jerry Jarrett looks up and goes, boys, that might have been the best explosion match I've ever seen. I was like, all right, cool.
Out of curiosity, did he ever bring up a chicken salad recipe?
No, not once did I get in. No kind of grapes or anything. Like, come on. And then the next week we do the 6-man, and I walk to the back, and he kind of looks up and he goes, boys, and I go, let me guess, best explosion match you've ever seen. And he goes, you took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, the feeling.
Yeah, it was good. You're right, Jerry. It was good.
Classic good match, kid. Yeah.
Yeah. Work on your footwork, kid. Sure will.
Oh, that's great.
But yeah, I mean those explosions, all that TNA stuff. Again, like one of my favorite TNA moments at the fairgrounds. It was the first time Wolfie D and Slash had seen each other in a long time. And again, huge New Gen fan. Like, New Generation is just like my favorite era of pro wrestling. Like, I love the WWF New Generation.
So PG-13 in the early Nation of Domination.
Yes. Yes. So they're talking, and I'm just like, oh my God. And then they start doing the nation thing, which I know, like, so like, we all the nation, live and in color. Don't diss the man, oh brother, Shabota. But like, they're doing it. And I'm like, oh my God, why is nobody here? Like, why don't I have a cell phone with a camera on it to record this? Oh, because it's 2003 and those aren't things yet.
In that moment, you're
Uh,
probably like that classic gif of, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's that fan when the Nation of Domination comes out and he's this guy with glasses
yes,
and he has his fist
yes,
raised up in the air.
yes,
Hilarious
yes,
gif. Just
yes. But I'm losing my mind, and there's nobody there with me to appreciate it. I'm like, come on. But yeah, I got to see Wolfie and JC Ice do the nation thing in the back, and I was just like, I've peaked. It's it's all downhill from here.
did you have a lot of interactions with Jamie Dundee besides that? Because he has quite the reputation, you know.
Yeah, he's just a wild dude. I've had like I said, I was doing stuff for Burt, and I would do Nashville stuff. So I've seen plenty of wild Jamie nights where it's just like, oh, that's not anything a human being should do. Yet here we are, and he's doing it.
You know, I didn't even think about it when you were doing that. Were you like in Memphis much when Lawler split from WWE for that 2001 during that period?
No, but he did come. Behrens did get him to come to Wildside. Him and the cat came down to Wildside.
All right.
So I did get to meet Lawler there. Uh, and again, that's one of those like, oh, that's the king of Memphis wrestling.
Yeah.
That's the dude. Like that's one of the voices of my childhood.
For my money, the greatest punch in pro wrestling.
Yes, well, billion%, yes. Uh, so yeah, that was cool, but yeah, no, I didn't. Just because Memphis is just on the other, it's way on the other side of Tennessee. Memphis is on the Arkansas side, so at the time I was about 5 hours from Nashville, so you'd have to put on probably another. It'd probably be about a 10-hour trip to Memphis.
A big trip. That's a big
Yeah,
trip.
yeah.
So another thing you did in TNA, which I find very interesting, is it was you and Antonio Banks against America's Most Wanted, and
Yes.
Antonio Banks went on to become MVP.
Yeah, so we actually just talked about that at Raw. Yeah, I mean, it's I'll always give him the credit for it. It's just something small, but like it was just one of those things where we were both trying to get a look, and right before we go out, Banks and I had known Banks from Florida Indies anyways, because by that point I had already started traveling pretty heavily. I was fortunate enough. God bless, Jimmy Rave always helped me get my name out there. Because again, going back to the do as I say, not as I do training techniques, nobody ever taught me about sending out tapes. Nobody told me about sending the 8x10s. So my first couple of years, I didn't because I didn't know. I just did, I just thought promoters would hear about your exploits and book you. I didn't understand you had to put in the work to get booked. And Jimmy was one of the first guys that that kind of showed me like, oh, no. Got contact this guy here and send this here. And, he really, really, really went out of his way to help me in that aspect. But like I said, so I had known Banks anyways, and literally right before we walk out, he goes, hey, you want to do something just to see if we can catch their eye? Like maybe here I come, I'm big and bad, and then like you stop me and cut me off and preen for the camera or something. And I was like, oh my God, character work. That's my favorite stuff. Yes. And it was just something small that it actually got picked up on the Fox Sports when they aired it, which I thought was super cool. But it was just one of those things where like Banks he's always had a mind for what to do when the camera's on. When that light's on, he knew how to turn it up even way back then. But like I said, I just saw Banks at Raw a couple weeks ago, and when we were when when he realized, because I had already spoken to Omos when when he walked up and he was like, "Oh, you're working with my guy tonight?" He goes, "Yeah," and he was like, "Oh, you got to take care of Sal. He was my tag team partner back in 1992."
That's great.
Yeah,
But yeah, he had star presence, and still obviously still does to this
immediately.
day, just
Yeah, and it's one of those things where like when the guys, you've always heard the stories about guys rebooking the territory when they're in the cars going from towns. And when FIP first started running hot and heavy with Gabe, uh, Banks was one of those guys that, like, when he would be brought up, I'd go, "Oh, I can't even fantasy book this guy. He's not long for this world. Like, he's
wow.
going to be signed. He's going to be signed."
Yes.
Like you just knew it. I mean, he had the size, he had the look, he had the ability to talk, he had it. And I mean, if anything, he proved me correct.
Yeah.
The four guys in that car is like, Sal nailed it on that one.
A guy who I had that opinion of it much later, and I think in a way it might have slowed down his push in Ring of Honor, was Dijak. Because here's a guy, he's huge, he's in great shape, he's a tremendous athlete, and it seemed like he was never really pushed in some of the bigger companies, and then he was signed. I think everybody knew it's like, well, we can only push him for so long because he's going to be out the door.
Yeah, he's gone. Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree with that theory more. Yeah.
So like I said, you worked AMW. What was it like working with Chris Harris and James Storm? Because I'm guessing there are another two guys who you worked with nationally.
Yeah. I mean, that was it was a night off. I mean, James Storm, like, so whenever James Storm is mentioned to me, my first thought always goes back to, like, Bert had us do a couple like angles together, and one of them was we did a cage match, and at the time, this is pre TNA. At the time, Storm was coming out to Cowboy by Kid Rock, but he wouldn't come out the curtain until the chorus hit. Well, that first verse, the intro of that first verse are like a minute and a half, 2 minutes. So, like, as a heel, you would come out and you would get your heat, and then you would just have to sit and wait forever.
Like a Raw commercial.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, come on, James, got it. You're a cowboy, baby. Let's go. Like, giddy up. And that's always my first thought when I think of James Storm.
That's such a funny thing.
Yes. He's just standing in the ring just waiting. Like, I hate this song. Even if I liked this song, you've made me hate this song. Like,
it's such an indie wrestling thing too, because
absolutely,
sometimes it's done where it's great, like Bryan Danielson, like with the Final Countdown, and it's like
Final Countdown, yes,
with AFI, I think it was,
yes,
and it's like there was this momentum, and then once people saw it was working, everybody wanted to do it, so you had everybody waited like a minute and a half or a minute to come out for the right part of their song.
Yes, no, and because I've always been the opposite, where like I like music just like everybody else, but like my entrance music is never. There's very, very, very few times where I'm like, I've got to have the right entrance music. Like, it's got to speak to me. Like 9 times out of 10, especially before the modern era where you could just tell somebody a song and they can pull it up out of the cloud via magic. I can't tell you how many times I'd show up to shows and like, hey, we need a CD for your music. I'm like, I don't, just play whatever. I don't care. Like, as soon as I hear a sound, I'm coming through the curtain anyways. Like, I don't need specific music to get me going. And so just having to sit in the ring for a month and a half while Kid Rock is strumming through the first chorus of Cowboy, like, this is some weird kind of torture. I don't know what karma I put out into the universe to make this my punishment, but it must have been real good, because I'm paying all of it back right now.
Did he have those cap guns at the time?
100%. Yes.
Oh, that was great.
Yes.
But yeah, him and Harris were just a phenomenal tag team. And, I had big expectations for Chris Harris. And, things
And
happen the way they
everybody did.
happen. But
Everybody did. Yeah.
I kind of thought he was the standout when I was younger, just without knowing better of the two. Like,
Oh, yes. Well, unquestionably. But when AMW were together, Chris was Sean and Storm was Marty.
yeah,
Nobody knew that they were going to flip flop.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, too, as a kid, I thought Marty was the guy. Marty did the rocker dropper. He was way cooler. So, like, I miss a lot on these tag teams, is what I'm trying to say.
That's another thing, though. Marty was such a phenomenal wrestler, man. He was great.
I've got one of the best compliments I've ever gotten in pro wrestling was an offhanded comment by Marty one day. So Marty lived in Columbus, and at the time Jimmy Rave lived in Columbus, and I was in town. I was picking Jimmy up. We were headed off to a show, and I called him on the way there. I was like, "Hey, man, do you have a gym I can get into? I'm going to get there super early. I'd like to, maybe get a lift in and tan." He's like, "Oh yeah," so he gives me his gym information or whatever. So I work out, I go tan, and when I get out of the tanning bed, who's there waiting? Marty Jannetty. I'm like, "Oh," and he just looks up and he sees me, and I'd met Marty plenty of times before, but still, it's Marty Jannetty.
Yeah.
And I walk out and I see him, and he goes, "Man, I should have known it was one of the boys that was in the tanning bed." And I was just like, "Oh, Marty Jannetty called me one of the boys. I've made it."
That's amazing. Oh man, that's amazing. So, we probably will have to start wrapping things up a little bit, but I still want to talk about a little more with TNA, specifically one thing, and that's Jeff Jarrett Slammiversary. What happened there?
Yeah, he's a real piece of work, that Jarrett is.
Still to this day.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things where I got called last minute. I was at a show Saturday night, and I got the phone call, "Hey, can you be in Orlando?" And I knew it was pay-per-view weekend, and I'm like, "Oh my God." I'm thinking, there's some X Division scramble or something, because they always had stuff like that where they were calling guys at the last minute. All those X Division guys I knew, just they're guys that I came up through the indies with, the Shelleys and the Sanjays and just all of them. Like, I'd known those guys, and they'd always, I'd seen them firsthand. Like, "Hey, you should find something for Sal. Sal would really work out well here." And probably 2 weeks before that, I did an indie with Petey, and Petey was super excited after the match. He was just, "Oh my God, I could do that on TV right now." And I was like, "Well, I don't have that say. I will let you do that on TV."
Yeah,
I'm not saying no, Peter. I'm saying you make it happen. I'll be there. So then I get this call like, "Hey, can you be in Nashville?" It was Dutch that called me. "Hey, or Nashville, Orlando. Can you be in Orlando?" Absolutely. So I get there, and at this point, like, Jarrett knows my name, which to this day still blows my mind. Like, some of these guys that like have no right knowing who I am call me by name, and it's just like, what's happening here, right? Like, that's not how this is. Like, what is life?
My Baby Tonight is
I bought that tape, I bought that cassette, and like, this dude's now just like, "Hey, Sal, I got something for you tonight." Like, what is happening? And so, but like, I go down with you, because they didn't give me any idea of what I was doing. They just said I had something. So I'm thinking, "Oh my God, maybe this is it. Maybe I'm an X Division thing." And Jeff pulls me aside. He goes, "You a fan of Jeff Hardy?" I was like, "Oh." Wow, this is left field.
Yeah,
I
right.
go, yeah, sure. I mean, who doesn't like Jeff, right? Like Jeff's the coolest of the cool. You can't breathe and not like Jeff Hardy. And he
Right.
goes, good. Because you're gonna dress up him like him tonight. I'm gonna beat you up. Oh, what? And he goes, yeah. And, and his thing is like Jeff was always transparent with me, which was weird. But he was just like, yeah, they're doing King of the Mountain tonight, and uh, they want me to lose, which makes no sense to me because I'm the King of the Mountain. So I have to get
Great
myself,
line.
yeah. He goes, so I got to get myself taken out of the match. I was like, okay. He goes, yeah. So we're gonna do a spot, where you're gonna be dressed like Jeff in the crowd. You'll be a little too aggressive. When I'm walking by, I'm gonna pull you out. I'm gonna hit you with a guitar. And I'm just like, man, I guess I'm not doing the X Division match. But I'm also like, man, I get to eat a guitar shot from Jeff Jarrett. Like, that's insanely cool. Like,
Kind of like a dream come true you never necessarily knew you wanted, but
yeah, no, it's not. It was never a bucket list item until I was told I got to do it. And I was like, yeah, 100%. That's what we're doing. Uh, Especially since like at that point, like I'd got to meet Jeff, and like Jeff was genuinely one of those guys that I was like, man, he's so cool. He doesn't even know how cool he is. Like he's a for real living, breathing rock star. Where like I've seen grown men well up in tears because they got to meet him. Right. So like, and Jeff's just like, yeah, man, that's cool. I'm like, no, that's a huge deal. Like, I know you're you, but like that's a huge deal for us normal humans. Uh, so yeah, we go out there, we did the spot, and he blasts me with the guitar, and I'm just like, yeah, man, yeah, I'm like Beetlejuice, like I'm like Mae Young. Put me on the list. Like
oh, what a
this
perfect
is
what a trio right there.
yeah, right, yeah,
Mae Young,
uh,
Beetlejuice, your pal Sal.
yeah. We were probably gonna be in the Chikara Trios tournament one year. Just
Definitely the winners of the King of Trios,
yeah,
without a doubt.
yeah. Not even close. But yeah, I know it was super cool, and it was just one of those things. Like, it's funny because I did it, and it was a very cool moment, and then I completely forgot about it till I did a podcast. I'd say about 2 years ago when somebody brought it up, and as soon as they brought it up, the light bulb went off, and I was like, oh yeah, oh man, that's cool. I did that. That's one of the things I love about doing these podcasts is you guys do some research and you'll remind me of stuff that I completely forgot I got to do. Like, like I said, I'm very lucky. I'm very blessed that like I've got such a laundry list of stuff that I've got to do that sometimes stuff just slips through the cracks until I'm reminded about it. I'm like, oh man, yeah, that's another really really cool thing that I got to experience. Like on live pay per view, I got to be pulled out of the crowd and hit with a guitar from Jeff Jarrett. Like that's awesome.
It's such a cool situation. And if you put it into perspective, like the last couple of people we were talking about, Jeff Jarrett, Jeff Hardy, Conan,
Yeah,
Road Dog,
yeah,
and like 10 years prior to this, you were the biggest fan in the world, and half of them
you
were
know,
people you watched weekly. You
yes,
know,
those were guys I was at Toys R Us buying their figures of. Like couldn't wait to buy them, couldn't wait to spend that money. And now like we're peers. Like that's insane.
and not only are they your peers, but they trust you enough to let you put stuff together and choose what
Yeah.
you do. Like at that point, because it's a special situation. It's very cool, very cool.
Yeah, no, and it's one of those things that I genuinely don't try to take for granted, and it just like I mean, we can fast forward to this year. I worked Matt Hardy. I did a singles match with Matt Hardy, and I basically put the whole thing together. And in the middle of the match, we're doing Matt's comeback, and he's giving me the 10 delete head to the turnbuckle.
Mm-hmm.
And in the back, he had mentioned, I want to do 10. And I was like, I bet we could get all 4 buckles.
Oh, wow.
And he was like, you think? I go, dude, they're going to be with it. I promise you. And he goes, okay, we'll try it. If they're not with it, we'll cut it short. I'm like, absolutely. And when we're headed to the 3rd buckle, Matt's got me by the head. He goes, I'm having the time of my life. And I was just like, how does any of this make sense?
Yeah.
At all? Like, I'm in the ring with Matt freaking Hardy, like
pitching something to him that he loves. That works.
Yeah, and he's in mid-match. I'm having the time of my life. I'm like, what?
Is that your first time wrestling, weird. Matt Hardy?
Yeah, that was. Yeah.
Very cool. How was he overall? Like, cool guy?
Beyond the best. I mean, just it was one of it. I can't even really summarize it in words. It's just like one of those, everything you wanted it to be, or everything I wanted it to be, it was that times 6. It was just so stupid cool. Where like I pitched an idea for the finish. Like Matt came to me, he was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, you're Matt Hardy, so I'm going to just fall down for you, is how that's going to work. And he's like, oh, no. Do you have ideas? And the big idea the only thing I was really married to that I really wanted to do is like, now that I'm doing this crazy thing, I sit and I clap and I rock.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, so I'm laying this out. Like I sit and I clap and I rock. I go, what if I hit you with the twist of fate? And when we land, instead of me taking a back bump, I'll land to my butt and I'll sit and clap and rock and sell it, so you just stand over me and you start doing the delete. While I'm sitting and clapping and rocking, I turn around, boot me, twist of fate, 1, 2, 3. And he goes, oh my God, yes. He goes, I'm never on that side of the no-sell. He goes, I'm always the guy that's having to hit the move and somebody else no-sells it. He goes, I've never got to do it. I was like, oh my God, well, tonight's your night, kid. Yeah. Dream the dream. It's real. And so he was like, well, what else you got? I'm like, well, what if we do this? What if we do this? And I got this. And it's literally me just pitching ideas and Matt just, oh my God, I love that. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, yeah, we can do that. And I'm just like, this is unfreaking real, right? Like, especially since I got to bring my son and he's losing his mind because, like, one of my all-time favorite moments as a dad and as a wrestling fan was I took my boys to WrestleMania 33, and that's when the Hardys came back. In the ladder match.
Thunderous reaction.
Well, somehow I had been able to block the thought from even entering their mind. Like, it had been openly discussed, like, ooh, I think the Hardys are coming back. But for whatever reason, it didn't click with them. They didn't hear it. So Xavier Woods, who's family, I mean, my kids call him Uncle Austin. Like, he's family to me. He's part of the, he's out there doing the cell job right before the Hardys come out. And I remember Jacob, who's my youngest son, who's the wrestling fan. My eldest son doesn't care. But Jacob, he's mini me. I mean, just he lives, breathes, dies off this pro wrestling stuff. But as they're doing this promo, he looks at me, he goes, do you think Uncle Austin's going to be in this match? And I was like, I don't know, baby. He goes, man, that would be cool. I can't think of anybody cooler. And then that, and I mean, we're in an outdoor stadium and the place is literally shaking. And just looking over and watching it dawn on my boys, it's the Hardys. They're here and they're in this match. And then watching them progressively lose their mind like everybody else in that stadium. It's just one of my all-time favorite wrestling moments and favorite dad moments. And then you fast forward a couple years, and I'm telling Matt Hardy what he's going to do in his match.
Incredible.
Right? Like, you can't write that kind of stuff.
Do you remember what company this was for?
AML.
AML, okay. Because I wasn't sure if
Yeah.
the match was out there for people to check out.
Yeah, I think it's it might be out there. I'm also insane and I can't ever watch myself. So it's possible the match is out there. I'll just never watch it.
Still super cool, super cool. All right, I've kept you for a while, but I do want to ask about your Raw appearance recently, because that, for me, that really stood out, because a little sneak behind, the camera. We talked briefly last year because I wanted to get this up and going. A lot of stuff got in the way. Never was able to quite get things going the way I wanted to. Fast forward almost a full year, and there you are on Raw. And at first, I didn't even it didn't even click, because sometimes with enhancement guys, you just kind of zone out. You don't necessarily look that closely, especially when there's multiple people at once.
Yes.
It's kind of just a wave of people, And then I was like, wait a second. And then it clicked. I was like, whoa, how did that happen? And what was the experience like?
Yeah, so it's fun. I mean, I've been doing extra work for WWE since 2003.
Yeah.
Off and on, but for whatever reason, I've never had a Raw match. And that's one of those, again, that's one of those bucket list things. Like, I grew up watching Monday Night Raw.
30 years in January.
Yeah, which is crazy to me, because I remember being excited for the first one, and just just full circle there, like when Tony Mamaluke and I won the Ring of Honor tag titles, it was at the Manhattan Center. And that's, dude, that's where the first Raw was. Like, oh my God, but anyways, so, but yeah, I've been doing extra stuff for WWE for forever, my whole adult life. I've had matches, I've had darks. I did an ECW match, but for whatever reason, the Raw spot never happened. Well, this last one, I stay pretty busy. Anything in the Southeast, I try to make sure my emails are sent out in time and let them know, like, hey, I'd love to be a part of the show. And I've got so many friends that work for the company. It's just hilarious to me. And it's one of those things that I don't really take into thought until we were at Raw this time, and the guy that I got pinned with is one of my best friends, and we were standing waiting for our physicals. And as we're standing there, every time someone would pass by, they would kind of give the wave to the extras and then stop and go, Sal, and it's just, I've been around forever, so I know, and as we're doing that, Adam Pearce walks by, who was the agent on the match, and he goes, oh my God, Sal. He's like, yeah, what's up, Pearce? Who I've known from, I knew Pearce from my Ring of Honor days.
Yeah.
And he was like, you're working tonight. And I go, I hope so. And he goes, no, I'm telling you right now. I got a spot. It's yours. I was like, oh my God, like, turn it down. There's more extras behind me. I don't want that heat. But yes, a million times. And he was like, yeah, it's going to be 3 or 4 guys. We'll figure it out. But you're 100% one of the guys. I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. But I've also been in that boat before, where earlier this year, in April of this year, I was supposed to get squashed by Veer on Raw. And they swapped it out. Like, Raw goes on the air. When Raw starts on TV, when Raw starts on TV, I'm scheduled to be working Veer. And by the end of the first segment, they swapped me out for somebody else.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so like now I know, like, I don't ever tell anybody, like, I have a match at segment 8, please watch.
Yeah.
But, Pearce runs it by me, and I just happen to be first in line for the physical. And he's like, when you're done with the physical, go ahead and meet me down at ringside. So I go down by ringside, and him and Omos are talking, and they're talking about the finish, and I go, "Oh, I'll take that." And Pierce goes, that's a scary bump. Are you sure you want to do that?" And he was like, make one of the kids take that. I go, no, no, no. Like, my son gets to see me on Raw. I'm going to take up as much TV time as I can. Even getting pinned, there's more face time for me if I'm eating that finish, because you're going to show a replay of the finish.
That's a smart way to look at it, because I don't think a lot of people would necessarily look at it that way. If anything, a lot of people would probably be like, "Oh, I don't want to be pinned." What if it? But you're smart. You see that as more television exposure, more
Absolutely.
showing people who I am and what I can do, because it's like a commercial when you're on TV.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's all it is me selling myself. And like, if I can do anything, I can fall down and make things look like they hurt. Because at my age, they usually do. But like, so, I'm like, please let me eat the finish. And he goes, okay, yeah, no, it's yours if you want it. He goes, but I take that bump at practice all the time. It sucks. I go, oh, I have no doubt about that. But, we're going to do this. And my buddy was the one that got pinned, with me.
Mm.
And so it was just super cool that like the two of us that, like we constantly are texting each other about stupid. Like today, he just texted me. He goes, "Hey, when are we going to add Manu to the bloodline?"
Fantastic.
And I was like, I hope never. I hated when he got added to Legacy. It's like,
oh, what a reference.
He's like, no, that's fair. Yeah, but I mean, that's our conversations constantly. But so like it was just such a super, super insane moment that we got to do that together. But like right before we go out, we're in Gorilla, and Austin Theory's the segment before us, and I've known Theory forever, and Rollins, who I talk to Rollins all the time. They're both coming through Gorilla, and they're just like, "Oh my God, Sal, like this is awesome. I'm so glad you get to do this." And there's Pierce, and I'm with MVP, who, like we talked about earlier, I did Impact with, 100 million years ago, and it's just
AJ
like
and Truth were probably there, right?
Yeah. No, and Gallows is back. Yeah. I mean, just so many guys. Like I said, I mean, it's nuts the number of guys, especially like Petey's an agent there. Abyss is an agent. Yeah, it's just wild. But right before we go out, like I told my buddy, I said, "Hey, I'm gonna kind of drag my feet a little bit because I know our entrance isn't on TV, and I'm gonna try to drink up as much of this as I can." And he goes, "Oh yeah, no, 100%, I'm with you." And so like, it was just one of those, like, I genuinely hope everybody that ever has the urge to lace up a pair of boots and chases this dream gets that feeling at least once. I mean, it's crazy to think that, like, because I've been on Raw before and, backstage segments and security spots and all that stuff, but to finally get this match, like, I'm 40 years old. I just turned 40 in September. And
happy birthday.
Thank you. And here I am on Raw, right? Like, it's just, and it was worth every hurdle that I had to jump to get to that point, even if it was just 2 minutes and I didn't get anything but a choke and a forearm. I did it, right? Like, that's absolutely the ultimate. And like, I made sure, like, there was very few people I texted, but I made sure I texted my son, said, "Hey, baby, make sure you're watching Raw tonight." Because again, I'm not going to tell him I've got a match just in case he gets scratched or something. Because I've had darks before where I've been at the curtain and they've said, scratch it. I'm like, no, don't scratch it. I'm ready to go. Like, change the plans. We're having this match. So like, I I tried to eliminate all the variables, but I made sure he knew, like, please be watching around this time. And as cool as all of it was, and like, keep in mind, so we're out there during the commercial break, and they're showing commercials to the live crowd, and one of the commercials is for the Undertaker's Netflix show. So like, I'm standing at ringside when the gong hits, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's super cool, right? Like, I know Undertaker's not coming out, but one of my dreams was always to be a druid. Like, that was always the extra goal for me, was to be a druid. Now, like, here I am at ringside, Undertaker's music's playing. Like, this is super cool. But getting to come back, and like, just that feeling of knowing, like, everything I was supposed to do, I crushed. Omos was super happy. Pierce sent me a really heartfelt text afterwards, just like, very congratulatory. But just there was a bunch of guys that were genuinely happy for me, but there was nothing better than getting back to my phone and having that text from my son. Just it's nuts,
the dream,
man.
It's the
Yeah,
dream.
I mean, it's just I've said it. I've probably said it 20 times a night. I will never stop saying it. I'm a lucky dude, man. I'm a very, very, very lucky. And just got to keep this ball rolling.
And those moments are gonna live forever too. Like, it's on Peacock, it's on WWE Network, it's on in some markets it's on Disney Plus, and then it's on YouTube. It's on all these places all over the world, and it's probably gonna outlive future generations to come.
100%. It's wild. It's just crazy to think, like, as much of a tiny little footnote as it is, like, my name's now on that list of people that have performed on Raw. You think about all the hundreds of millions of people that put on wrestling boots and wanted to do this and be a part of this industry that never got that shot. And like, now my name's forever on that list, and it can't be undone.
Yeah. It's wonderful. So, real quick, what was it like working with him? Because is he the largest individual you've ever wrestled? He's got to be, right?
He's the largest individual that's ever been alive. My favorite, yes, my favorite part is, so right before we go out, because we've got the spot where I jump on his back, and then the three of us that are still up start hitting him.
Mm-hmm.
And Pierce, who's our agent, goes, "Hey guys, I know you know this, but like, make those shots count. Like, he's a big guy. Don't throw weak shots, because then in turn everybody involved is going to look weak. Make these shots mean something." And right before I go out, Pierce tells me, he goes, "Hey, lay him in," because like, I've got his back, so I know I'm just throwing forearms to his back. I know how to hit very solid in very safe places. A forearm to the back's not going to kill you. So I'm fired up. I'm ready to go. The lights are on, blah, 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 blah. We get to the spot. I kid you not. I bring my forearm back, and I have never in a million years ever swung my forearm. I mean, I'm Barry Bonds and Mark McGuire in one. Like, I'm swinging for all the fences, right? Like, this is more than a moonshot. This is a Saturn shot. I'm going, like, I blast him with a forearm right to the back, and he goes, "Harder."
That's fantastic.
Harder? I can't. Like, dude, I just shot on you, and you don't even know it.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Like, harder, literally impossible for me. Bro, you win. Like, we just take it home now.
Every ounce of energy you can muster.
Yes.
Nothing.
Everything I had, I hit this man with, and he was just like, "Dude, I'm going to need you to connect." I'm like, "What?" But yeah, it was. I mean, it was very cool. I mean, he was so gracious, and the whole time he was, I'm green, but once I get it, I got it. And I mean, he was awesome. He was. Uh, we did a spot where he gave me a gourd buster, and normally you hook the head for a suplex. My arm didn't reach around. It wasn't a lack of effort. It was just the fact that he is an elephant-sized man, and my arms only go so long.
And that's the kind of person that you're not going to just find. You're not going to be able to just pick out people can be critical, but you made it sound like he's humble and hard and wants to learn, which is awesome. But also, you can't teach size. You can't.
No. He passes the airport test. There's not a place in the world where he walks that people don't stop and look to see what he's doing.
I think he might pass the spaceship test because he's that big. He probably see him from up there.
No, they're scanning. They're just like, oh, that's a mountain. No, that's a man. That's big old dude. But I mean, he couldn't have been more humble. He couldn't have been nicer. I mean, he definitely went out of his way to thank us multiple times, and especially with Banks too. Just it was one of those things where I think I took the squisher and the buckle, and I'm selling down, and MVP's at ringside yelling, and I kind of just I'm laying there and I'm looking over, and I'm just like, this is storybook stuff.
20 years after working with them, in front of I don't know how many people, probably 100, 200 people,
Yeah. The thing is, like, walking down that ramp in Impact was a big deal.
Yeah.
For both of us at the time, because he was also he's trying to get looked at just like I was.
Absolutely.
And for it to come full circle where we're sold out house in Charlotte, it was one of those. Like I said, I'm so fortunate that I learned to stop and appreciate the moment, and I did. And I mean, it was just, like I said, no matter what happens from this moment forward, that can never be undone. It was super cool fairy tale storybook stuff. Minus, no, I was just saying, minus me being dropped from 7,000 feet in the air.
I mean, you even have the giant, so it is literal fairy tale.
Yes.
If I'm lucky enough to interview again, this was amazing. Thank you, by the way. There's so much to discuss. I want to go over your other experiences with WWE. I want to go over Wrestling Road Diaries. Oh man, I really want to go over that. We didn't even touch on Ring of Honor. Barely touched on Jimmy Rave. I could probably talk to you for another 4 or 5 hours if I wanted to. But before we go, would you consider that your favorite WWE appearance just because of everything that went into it? If not, we can save the story, but
it's the most fulfilling by far, just because there's the whole aspect of my son got to see me. Plus, like I said, I 40 years old. I'm 40 years old. I shouldn't be wrestling on Raw, and here I am, 40 years old, wrestling on Raw. It's so improbable. But it was an amazing thing. But like I said, the most, by far the most fulfilling, just because all the people that were there that were excited for me, and getting to get back to my phone and having that text from my son was, it was super cool.
Super cool. And this interview was super cool. I really appreciate you doing it and offering
thank you. Yes.
Thank you so much. Like I said, there's so many questions still I'd like to go over in the future. But before we wrap things up, let's get to the plugs, because there's, after you dedicated 2 hours of your time, people need to follow you on social media. You check out your Pro Wrestling Tees store. So just everything you've got.
Yes, please. You can follow me on Twitter at Sal Rinauro. That's Rinauro. A lot of vowels. My parents hated me. Or they really liked Pat Sajak and Wheel of Fortune. I don't know. on Instagram at Sal_Rinauro, because I messed up making the first account because I'm not good at technology. Facebook, Sal Rinauro, and my pro wrestling tees. It's pro wrestling tees / That's right, you guessed it, Sal Rinauro. Beauty of having an insane name. Not a lot of us Rinauros running around. I also do want to plug. We are literally. I mean, by the time this posts, it might be too late. But
Yeah.
I'm literally less than 24 hours away from getting on a plane to head to New Orleans for NWA Hard Times 3 and the Revolution Rumble afterwards. But you can always follow us on at Fight TV. You follow the NWA product. I'm lucky enough to be all over that.
Follow on YouTube too. Definitely follow on YouTube.
Yes. And next time I'm on, I'll have I've got a million great NWA stories.
Yeah, on my notes, because you saw the notes, it's like probably 100 pages long. I had a lot of Ring of Honor. There's a lot of NWA. So I would definitely love to talk to you more again. Thank you so much again, everybody. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Make sure to follow him. Make sure to check out his Pro Wrestling Tee store. And yeah, let's just keep on loving pro wrestling, because this was a great conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.